Generative arts. The take-up of generative processes in electronic art preceded many other areas of arts, and the creative expression with algorithmic processes continues as an active area of innovation. The abstract nature of much artwork and its embrace of the strange or the impossible meant that often unpredictable outcomes of generative processes were more welcome as artistic expression, even when, or perhaps because, they seemed impractical or maybe they came from some other world. Generative processes often involve rules that simulate structures or procedures in nature or human practices. In computational systems, we can program those activities to take place using algorithms, like the Lindenmayer system that replicates branching patterns in plant growth. When we apply those rules in software, out of the rules emerge new works, as seen in John McCormick's digital plant images in his Blooms series. These kinds of processes produce works that are often novel and sometimes valuable. When considering generative creative practices, it's useful to be aware of pioneers in generative art. Two of these pioneers are Harold Cohen and David Cope. Cohen created one of the first successful drawing robots, called Aaron, which had works shown in galleries and sold at art auctions. When discussing his motivations for this work, Cohen remarked, "It occurred to me that if I could write a computer program to do some of the things human beings do, then I might possibly learn more about the nature of representation than I had ever done by simply painting." End of quote. This interest in instructing a computer to make creative works in order to better understand the creative practices themselves was also a driving force for the music composer David Cope. Cope created some amazing early examples of generative music with his Experiments in Musical Intelligence system that imitated the styles of famous composers based on analysis. It did this well enough to fool all but the leading experts in blind tests comparing the originals and the computer-generated facsimiles. The broader field of generative arts has influenced the mainstream practices in creative coding. A leading figure in creative coding is Lauren McCarthy, the developer of the P5.js programming language, and she's a leading artist in her own right. In creative coding, the software becomes the medium of artistic expression, and works are realized either in real time as screen-based or projected works, or as rendered outputs in a more traditional media such as paper prints. Creative coders develop algorithms that produce works with particular aesthetic characteristic that's embedded in the software. In recent years, the techniques of artificial intelligence have been applied to generative art practices. Typically, these follow machine learning processes where a network extrapolates patterns from many examples of work exposed to it, and then generates new works based on those patterns. A particularly productive approach has been used in using generative adversarial networks, or GANs. These have two networks, a generator and a discriminator, that work in parallel. The generator produces works and the discriminator, trained on real examples, selects those that fool it into assessing them as real. Because there is no human in the loop, computers can churn through many examples looking for convincing generated effects. However, the network selection process is not always human-like, and so some odd, but often interesting, examples are created. Regardless of the rules used, or even if they are hand-coded or extrapolated by machine analysis, computational generative art systems are finding an expanding role in creative practices.